If you want to learn how you can batch your podcast so you spend less time on creating them and actually more time on getting results from them, this episode is for you. Because today we're going to teach you how you can batch as many as 18 podcast episodes in 2 days and how you can make sure that your podcasts aren't just busy work but are actually getting you new leads and new sales every day. Hello, and welcome to the Fast Forward Amy show, the show where we lift your life and business with simple strategies. I'm Fast Forward Amy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode every Tuesday. Recently, I recorded 18 podcast episodes in only 2 days, which was kind of like 4 months worth of content because we publish a new episode every week. But I remember a time when I was sitting in the car listening to an Amy Porterfield podcast episode about mega batching, where she was talking about recording 6 podcast episodes in 2 days. And I remember sitting in the car and thinking, no fucking way that is possible or that I could ever do that. Because back then, I don't think I had my podcast yet, but I was in that zone where if I needed to make something, I would make it the night before. And that ended up being the reality for my podcast too, because I was by myself at the time. I had one virtual assistant working for me 10 hours a week. But the whole launching the podcast and hosting the podcast was kind of before there were a lot of podcasts near me. It wasn't as popular with videographers and stuff yet to like help with podcast recordings. So I was determined to just do it myself, low budget. And that's how I started. But I was determined to always publish a podcast episode on Tuesdays, which is still the case, by the way. Next week is our 100th episode. But it ended up just being me on Mondays in my pajamas, always just like hustling and looking like, oh shit, I still need a new lead magnet. What am I recording? Stuff like that. So I ended up always looking like a bum and recording on Mondays so I could publish on Tuesdays. Which is, by the way, why I chose Tuesdays and not Mondays for my podcast. Because I figured back then, if I do it on Mondays, I will have to work on Sundays and I don't want that. So I already knew I was just always gonna, muck it up for myself. Fast forward, almost 100 episodes later, and I am at the point where I can record 18 podcast episodes in 2 days, or in general record 4 in the morning, 8 in a day, or 16 in 2 days, stuff like that. I don't only own one podcast, but I co-host a second podcast as well as produce a third podcast, which means that I've kind of like learned a lot about podcasting. All of that combined means hundreds of thousands of downloads in the podcast, a bunch of email subscribers that come through the podcast, and 80% of my Business Freedom Elevator clients who listen to the podcast and then sign up to become a client. So I think it's safe to say that back when I wanted to launch my podcast, and by the way, I postponed it twice because I was afraid no one was going to listen or going to like it, that I made a good call. And to this day, people still ask me like, but why do you do all of that for free? And I remember my mom asking me like, but how long are you going to keep making the podcast? And I was like, what do you mean how long? It's forever. So, it's been a trip for these almost 100 episodes. And today I figured I'm gonna tell you how I make sure I can batch my podcasts. And I'm gonna be going through the 7 steps that I use to batch record my podcasts. And it's not what you think. You think this episode is one thing, but it's gonna end up being another thing. So I'm gonna start. I have my whiteboard with me if you're watching on IGTV or YouTube. If you're listening, know that as always, we have provided an article for you with all of the images and links we talk about. So if you go to fastforwardamy.com/99, which is the number of this episode, you can find the article with all of the different steps I'm talking about. In every podcast, we always have our article and the email we send out on launch day, but we also always offer a download. So that means later you'll hear me talk about a template. I'm also going to be offering that to you. And in the article, you can always find all of the links that you need in order to like become successful from this podcast episode. Okay, so we want to become, as my best friend would say, we want to be batching bitches. We want to batch our podcast because spending half day or like a day a week on your podcast, that isn't going to be very profitable for your business. Like your podcast can generate you a ton of leads and authority and all of that, but you need to be wise with your time, which is why batching 7 episodes in a day, as long as like after a while, if you get used to it, is actually a fairly good idea. Or the way I'm doing it right now during recordings, 2 mornings of 4 episodes each. That works too. Okay, podcast batching. I'm gonna work in different steps, and the first step, so how do I prepare, how do I brainstorm, how do I come up with topics, is I start out with my sales plan. So the first step is we look at our sales plan, and I'm not gonna make this super complicated. This is literally how I teach my clients how they can do this. And basically, when you look at your plan for the year, for example, you might have like January, so we have our month that we're looking at. We have free content. We have lead magnets. And we have our product, what we are offering. So if you're not seeing this, I wrote month, free content, lead magnets, products from left to right. So basically, I'm gonna look at what does your sales plan look like. And it could look like for Q1 that you have January, February, and March. Those are still the first 3 months of the year, I think. And what a lot of people do is just like, okay, I'm gonna podcast. I'm just gonna episodes, content, a bunch of shit goes out. And I used to be like that too. And you're probably like that. But we're not going to start with the free content. We're not going to start by looking at our lead magnets either. We are going to start by looking at our products. And truth is, for us, we will probably launch our Business Freedom Elevator in February and also in March. So that means in January, we might do like a pop-up sale or something, but let's assume we're not selling anything and we are just like building up to the Business Freedom Elevator, which is like a whole thing. January also has a theme of like getting your shit together, the start of the new year, which is like a perfect month for us to create like a really good webinar on that, on time management. And funny part is that is also a part of our BFE, so we could really like just focus on maybe our time management system in January, sell that. That's like a mini course we have to offer. So, okay, we will be building up to the BFE as like a low tier offer, building up to a higher tier offer. So we have our time management product that we are selling in January, BFE in February and March. Let's assume that's what we're doing. So that's a mini course that I have, and then that's our flagship business coaching program that you might be a part of. If you don't know what it is, by the way, check it out through fastforwardamy.com/elevator. Because exciting things are coming up. We actually just closed the launch, so I'm kind of done talking about it, but for the sake of teaching you how to create this plan, I will show you. So let's assume we're doing that. That means that in January, if we want to get our leads through the door on our email list, we want to focus on, for example, our time management checklist, which is a download that we have, or our Productive Power webinar. We have two different things that we could use to get people through the door. Now, for the sake of this, I want to choose only one. So let's assume I will be running a webinar. That's how we're going to generate leads and sell them our time management checklist. I've been wanting to run a webinar and sell a low tier offer on that webinar for ages, so I feel like this is a really great idea, right, team? Great idea. Cool. Let's send this to the team after this. Okay. Now in February and March, though, we're selling our Business Freedom Elevator. So I feel like we should do maybe a sales challenge. Like do a 5-day challenge on Instagram. Maybe get people to our Facebook group where we can get their email address if they want to. And then like a bunch of interaction and engagement, and then like kick off the BFE launch. Sounds like a great plan. And then by the end, maybe in March when we are closing registrations for BFE. So by the way, I'm assuming you already know what you're using for your lead magnets, but I'm just taking the time to explain this to you because like I know this is about podcasts and batching, but they'll figure it out in a bit, okay? So let's assume here we want to focus not just on sales, but we want to focus on money mindset. We have a money mindset free training. It's not a webinar, but it is something that people can just download and it's a video they watch. Why is it a video? I think it will do better than just a checklist or whatever, because we have a bunch of checklists, but there they can actually see me on video, which is also what they will get in the BFE. So it makes sense to give them something that is like what they will need for BFE, but that will also convince them to buy BFE. Some sales hacks for you, behind the scenes. Okay, so if we work backwards, we look at our sales plan. We're still in step 1, by the way. And we look at which product we're going to sell, which is basically be a fee. And I want to look at, for example, the podcast recordings for February and March, because I want to record 8 podcast episodes. Then that means that here I gotta be focused on confidence. Sales has to do a lot with confidence, on literal sales and marketing and social media. But mostly just sales and the things that lead to sales. Then in March, I can tell, okay, still be a fee, so still like a bunch of topics that we always teach, but especially things on money mindset, on looking at the transformation. So we can talk about launching and what a launch can offer you. We can talk about, doing the work, because like a lot of people by the end of the launch, they'll be like, but will I be able to do it? I need accountability. I need to be able to just like go for it. And I'm afraid if I invest, I won't be able to do the course or the program. So we're talking about doing the work. But basically it could just be time management, and we can be talking about money mindset. And maybe that's very aligned with manifesting. Now this is already kind of a brainstorm here, as you can see. Usually I wouldn't do it like that. I would be like, okay, sales challenge, that means we're talking about sales. Money mindset, that means we're talking about money mindset. Just like we're giving some advice here, we're giving way better advice here, and here is the ultimate solution they need. That's how we create this. If you have physical products, you can do it like this too. I'm already going fairly in depth because I don't know if you can tell, but I'm on a fucking roll here because I'm having so much fun recording these podcasts. Yesterday I was really tired. I was feeling less on a roll. But then I was stressing out and doing things. And I kind of just reframed my mindset. I thought, this is what I was wishing for. I wanted a team that did my hair and makeup. I wanted everything to be professional. I want to be held accountable and work like ahead of time. So now I am loving it. And, I have my whiteboard with me, the flip chart. So I'm happy, definitely. So we have this now. And this is going to be the basis for like what we need, because our second step is we need to know who our ideal client is. And obviously, there's a little puppet. I'm extremely bad at drawing. Whenever I draw a microphone, I make it look like something else. So I'm not allowed to draw microphones anymore. So we have our ideal client, and if you have been running your business like we teach it in the Business Freedom Elevator, and if you've been at this for a while with me, with the podcast, you know that obviously, Governor, your ideal client needs to be the client for your product. So your product and your ideal client need to be buddy-buddy, right? They need to love that. It needs to fix their needs and desires. Otherwise, what are you doing? Make sure that's aligned first before you continue with a podcast or whatever, because there's no use in getting new leads, new traffic if you haven't like nailed this down yet, okay? You know who your ideal client is. You know like which shows they watch, what they want, if they have kids or not, what their pains are, what their pleasures are, the transformation they're looking for, what their stories are, and you know how to speak to them. That's something I'm assuming. Also, we teach you that in our programs, but I'm assuming it's for the sake of today. So what I do is I look at my sales plan, and then I have difficulty making decisions, and then my team thinks I'm the bottleneck because I don't make decisions. Then everything gets stuck in our business because I don't make the decisions. So long story short, I'm telling you, just make this sales plan, okay? I know it's very difficult to plan ahead, but you just gotta make decisions. And remember that it's easier to adjust your decisions as you go than to work from zero if you don't have any decisions. So for me, for content, sometimes I'm like, yeah, but maybe it's time management. Maybe it's self-care. Let's just see how everyone feels in January. No, Amy, no. Just make the decision, okay? People will feel motivated, but also bad. Take that into account in your content in January. Okay, so we know what we're selling. We know who we're selling it to. So our next step is now we can start figuring out what we're going to make podcast episodes about for our batching days. So we are going to mind map or brainstorm. Maybe you're more of a vertical thinker, like you like lists. I'm more of a horizontal thinker, or I just like to mind map. So you might have seen this, but in my office, I have these huge whiteboards. No surprise there. And I will just like go there, and for half an hour, I will just like mind map all of my different ideas. And basically, I know kind of what my clients need, but this will help me. Okay, so I'm definitely talking about sales. What does a client like that need about sales? Okay, so sales could be like how to make your first 1,000 a month. Ooh, that would be a really great thing for the challenge, by the way. Okay. See? And this is the part where you don't get upset about, oh my God, ideas, or when do I do that, or do I change the challenge, or whatever. You just start writing out all of the ideas. How to make 1,000 a month. If you have an idea of like your story about that, is like I have a buffer story about that I like once got $1,000 cash and put it like in my bedroom because back then I didn't have a lot of money. I almost had no money. But I was working on my money mindset a lot, so I figured out that if I could actually have the money, then that made me feel more abundant and it allowed me to create more money. And as I'm saying this and as I'm thinking about that thing, I'm actually thinking that's not a good story for this, but it is a really great story about how I went from like broke scarcity mindset to like millionaire CEO. Right? Okay, so already have it. So I'll start writing out the ideas and then I'll be like, oh, a really great hook or a personal story of that. And like, just like adding it up. You see that this is not a large enough whiteboard. So make sure when you are investing in whiteboards and flip charts, you take like really big ass whiteboards. Like chalkboards if you want your kids to enjoy too. Make sure you don't allow your kids near the whiteboards with the wrong markers so you then don't end up with a bunch of drawings that aren't supposed to be there. I speak from personal experience. And you have this mind map. Okay, that's the really fun part, by the way. That is how you get prepared. And your next step, as I said, is you can start looking for a hook. So I will add the hook of like the broken scarcity mindsets to, I have a story about my car. I have the story about the 1,000 euros in buffer, which would be really great to have it lead to the $1,000 sales challenge. Let's just be honest that is a really great hook. Like, okay, now I'm going to help you make that buffer so you can put it in your room and feel abundant. Okay, what else do we have? We have like more money mindset stuff. We have tips about launching, about how to launch your website, for example. A lot of people think about that stuff. How to become more confident in sales, or maybe I should make an episode about how to become more confident in bed. You know, that will get a lot of listens. So I can just mind map it all out. That usually takes me like 30 to 60 minutes, but I can do it in 30 minutes under pressure. Might not be my best content. So 60 minutes is going to be better. You might feel weird about doing this because you're like in the how and you're like, no, but Amy, I thought you were going to teach me how to set up the microphone. I won't, but I have a guide on that. It's actually not the lead magnet for this episode, but if you're like, Amy, I want to start a podcast, we do have a guide that's Start Your Podcast. On our website, you can always find all of these resources, but if you just go to fastforwardamy.com/start your podcast, I've outlined all of the gear and boring stuff for you. So you don't have to ask me again. Okay, so I mind map it all out. I have these different hooks that make it very personal before I start giving tips, because for me, it's both like the personal and the mindset and the actual valuable, actionable tips that make it really great. So that was step 4, was find my hooks, or at least have some ideas for it as I'm in a creative mindset. This is like right brain thinking. Next up is we're gonna have to order the content and like plan it all out, which is less fun. Coming from someone who's more creative than organized. So the next boring step is you gotta fill it out in the Excel file I will give you for free. So, you know, that's a document that you can get from me. It's step number 5. No, I forgot a step. First we go and figure out which lead magnets it can lead to. Remember the lead magnets? They were here. We have to figure out those episodes. Where can they lead us to? They don't have to go directly to the pitches, you know, because we're not pitching in a podcast. You can try, it works, but it's easier to just fill your bucket with new leads and email subscribers. So I used to not do this, which is why I was almost forgetting this step. I used to go from here to just making a podcast plan. But then you forget about the part that what I've done in the past kind of wrongly in my podcast is I made this really great podcast episode and I was like, oh, and by the way, if you want this download. But then it's like an afterthought. And honestly, the conversion from the podcast to the lead magnet is terrible. You want to actually make that podcast episode because you want people on your email list. If you're not offering lead magnets in your podcast episode, that's probably why, unless you have a lot of downloads, why your podcast isn't making money yet. You should really make sure that you get those email subscribers. Remember that you can lose your podcast, but it's difficult to lose your email subscribers. Okay, so we figured this out. Okay, how to make 1,000 a month. I feel like that will be really great for the sales challenge because that's basically going to be the gist of the sales challenge. From a broke to a scarcity mindset, like a millionaire mindset. Love that too for the sales challenge. So, okay, we have our first episodes for the first weeks of February as well. It's also my birthday in February, so a little life update or like 29 lessons in 29 years would also do really great. And I could talk about confidence there. So like 29 lessons in 29 years would be a great episode. The lead magnet there would be my confidence download that I already have. Okay. And that's like for a wider audience because I like to mix strategy and just mindset. All of it is like growth, mindset, growth, strategy, stuff like that. I gotta remember to take a photo of this paper later because we're gonna be using this. And then, okay, we have our sales plan. We have our ideal client. We have a mind map with different topics that we cannot lose. Take a photo on your phone so you can't lose it because before you know it, your kid takes something to wipe out everything on your whiteboard. You have the different hooks that make it super interesting. It's optional. It will just make your podcast more interesting. We know which lead magnets it's leading to. So we have 2 more steps left. We have to make sure that, yes, I was thinking I might have missed a step, but I didn't. We have to like fill it out in the outline document. Oh, am I going under the table? Am I writing? Can you still see what I'm writing? Okay, fill it out in the document, which in my case is like this Excel file that I've arranged in a really cool way. Show you on the screen right now as I'm talking, where you can start organizing, start outlining the different things you know you're going to talk about, and then you just like type it all in, all of the information which lead magnets leading to the different takeaways in the episode. So I will never write out full sentences, but I do want to just like get it all in there. Still stay in the right brain mindset. So still stay creative and like, this is what I want to teach people. And then you start organizing. And that is the next step is, turns out I have 8 steps today. So there was a reason for me being confused. So the next step is that you actually order and prep everything. And ordering and prepping everything, I mean looking at, is the timeline still correct? Can you still make sure that... the lead magnets are going to be on time. Is the order correct? For me, it means like, do we have enough mindset and business stuff? We don't only have business people listening, stuff like that. So as I've done these 7 steps, it did work out. So you organize that entire document. And then on game day, the final step comes. So that is the undisclosed step number 8. Yeah, which doesn't fit on the whiteboard anymore. I can see my team stressing out about the fact, do we need to stop her? Do we need to stop recording or can she continue? I've got this. We will continue. On game day, you print it out and you record. Yeah, okay, maybe you've done it before. Like you printed it out the day before. Maybe like you went over it the week before, go over everything. For me, that means going over the brainstorm with my team, aligning it with sales plan, all of that. But then on D-Day, you record. And I am assuming you were listening to this because you thought I was going to help you the day of. Like, what do you do? How do you, like, how long do you take for every episode? Sometimes I record 2 episodes in an hour. Sometimes it takes me an hour to record an episode. And that's with a professional team. I usually spend an hour and a half in hair and makeup, stuff like that. But that does not matter for you. I would not recommend you spend as much money as I do on our podcast. I recommend you make sure you have your preparation so that then you do go through the efforts. Maybe you have a friend who helps you to set up the microphone, to record it on your iPhone, to do it with a camera or not. It doesn't really matter. But if you don't have your preparation, it's gonna go very slow. You're gonna end up like me, whereas on recording day, it's just always Monday and you're always recording it last minute. But when you have this preparation, it is very easy to record. So if you want to batch any type of content, be it video content, podcast content, reels, whatever, if you want to do that and you want to use my special Excel document that has taught me how to like structure podcast recordings in a very fast way, you can grab it for free through /batch your podcast. So that's FastForwardAmy.com/batch your podcast. And it's one of those things where Laura told me a while back, who works in our team. She told me like, yeah, in the past year, you've been so busy that you've really had to teach yourself and like create these frameworks and automations for yourself to do things really quickly. And this is one of those. We actually also give it to our Boss Up mentorship clients because this is one of the things we teach them, how to automate your daily behavior so it becomes much more efficient and effective. So FastForwardAmy.com/batch your podcast is where you can download my template for free. You're welcome. And all of the steps that come afterwards, yeah, they're important. Gotta edit the podcast, gotta write copy, emails, articles, stuff like that. You can make that however complicated or simple as you want. If you want to know about the systems and all of that, I've linked everything up in the article, /99, because this is our 99th episode. But today I really wanted to hone in on the fact that don't just randomly do stuff. Don't just keep people on a podcast platform. Make sure they get in your bucket and that you actually sell them something, because a podcast is great. It can be amazing for your business, and it's amazing evergreen content that keeps on working. But if you just wing it, you might be putting in a lot of effort and getting not a lot out of it. So get organized, which is not something you'll hear me say very quickly, but I will add that not only has it made the results more effective for us, it has also made me fall in love again with the way we podcast, because I'm really proud of these stories and of these things that we help our clients accomplish. And when I can create podcast episodes that make me feel like, wow, I should really be charging people for this, like this episode, I'm so happy. I'm so happy with the results we get with people we can help for free, and that people give us shout outs. So on that note, if you liked this episode and you're a little bit amazed with how much value you're getting from us for free, I would love it if you could give us a shout out. So we're the Fast Forward Amy Show. You can find us on Instagram as @FastForwardAmy. Next week, we're back with a big surprise for our 100th episode. And thank you so much for listening. Come and tag me on FastForwardAmy on Instagram, and see you next week, Tuesday. Bye.